to go ahead and get started so we don't waste any more time. If you could do a roll call for me, I appreciate it.
Sure thing. Chair Tom Farrell.
I'm here.
Meredith Knight.
Here.
Ronald Hasso.
Here.
Brooke Brown.
Here.
And Wallace Greener. And Wallace is here. And it looks like that's all we have right now. I know of at least one more who should be coming a little bit late too. So we'll have a few more.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started with what we have. The consent agenda consists of our minutes from February the 8th, the 10th, and March the 8th. I'm going to go ahead and, if you don't mind, just put all 2, 3, and 4 items 2, 3, and 4 together. And again, I'll ask that if we, and I'm going to do this a little bit different since we have a smaller group. If somebody would like to make a motion to accept the minutes as read, I would appreciate that. And then Wally, thank you. And do we have a second? And we have a second, Brooke. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any amendments or changes we'd like to make on these minutes? And just raise your hand if you want to make any. I don't see any. So we'll go ahead and call the question. All those in favor of accepting the minutes as submitted, and just keep your hand down. If you oppose that, just raise your hand. Ron, that's a little bit different than normally, but that's how I've tried to do it because I can't see everybody at one time. So I don't see any hands up, so the minutes are accepted. Item number 5 is the update from our single family subcommittee. I have a memo that I have drafted that I will get out hopefully either tomorrow or Wednesday that kind of lays out all of the issues that I see on our single family subdivision, the single family subcommittee that we have. That's not inclusive, and I'm going to send that first I'm going to send it to everybody on our task force, but specifically if the members of that are on our subcommittee for the single family could make their comments back to me. As soon as I get those comments back, I'm going to go ahead and call a separate meeting for the subcommittee on single family that we can do through the Zoom call, of course, and try to get an outline of what we want to try to look at on that. So, and I've talked to Ashley a little bit, so we know how to proceed with this to get that done. So that's, are there any questions on, let's just go to item number 6. Any questions or public comments on the single family subdivision? Single family subcommittee. I'm just going to never get that right, but I'll do my best on that. Not seeing any, we'll move on. Item number 7 is the update from the tax rate and bond subcommittee. And Brooke, do y'all have anything else y'all want to add? I think y'all were fairly clear and complete about where we were.
Yes, there's nothing to add at this time, Tom.
Right. I think y'all have pretty much outlined everything that you need to outline. Is there anything else that you see coming up that you might want to include that we may want to be looking at in the future?
The only thing on my to-do list, and I need to get to this, is to follow up on a conversation that I had with the mayor right before we came out with the prior report. And he asked that we prepare an outline of topics that might be included in the comprehensive plan in terms of city finance and strategic focus for city finance. And I just have not done that research yet, but I will put that on the front burner.
Great.
Probably have something that I can share at the next meeting.
Excellent. Thank you, Brooke. on item number 8, are there any public comments on the tax rate and bond subcommittee or any other comments? Wally, and Wally, you're off. Your volume is off. There you
Should
go.
be on now. Oh, I'm
Gotcha.
on now.
Thank you, sir.
Because I'm not a resident, so I'm sticking my nose again in where it doesn't belong, but I understand that there are now some available federal grants and state grants to help cities redo problems with their public utilities. Is City of Rollingwood got a committee? I mean, of all the committees we have that I understand we have, one to look into grants to help solve some of these problems we had during the freeze might be something that we should look at.
I think the city has been, staff has looked at, I know they've looked at many of the grants that are available on that. There are some FEMA grants that came in from standpoint of from the freeze and because it was declared a major natural disaster that we are eligible for. And I know the city is taking advantage of some of that. There is a ton of grants, I will tell you, both from a state and a federal level that are continuously, I mean, it's forever you can, and TxDOT, and I mean, you name it, there's a pool of money. Most of the time, the city of Rollingwood finds itself, and this is just from an experience, Wally, finds itself in a position that they don't look too favorably on most of our grant applications because they figure that we have the wherewithal to get it done ourselves without the grant. In addition, I will tell you there has been, and this is just again from experience, we have had some opportunities to get grants and did get a grant on a couple of different things that when we did the analysis, our share of the grant was say 50%. And when we added all of the conditions that you have to go through to the hoops you have to jump through to adhere to the grant application process, our 50% was equal to basically us just doing it ourselves without any grant. The cost of the additional deal. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't proceed with that. And I think staff has done a pretty good job of analyzing which ones we qualify for. I don't think Amber's on here today, but that's a good point you're making. And it is I know right now there are not only grants, but there's some low interest rate loans specifically targeted to utility systems that we may end up having to be, or we may end up being that we could possibly apply for on there. But that's something that you have to go through each analysis and see which one, and some of that is fairly expensive to make the application, either in staff time or consultant time that you have to go through to do that. So they try to target which ones that we've come up with. I'm trying to think, Ashley, I know we got some or getting some FEMA grants from the freeze in regard to help us with some of the vegetation pickup and that sort of thing. Whether we get any for our frozen pipes or our utility system or to improve that, that's something I don't know whether we will qualify for that or not. But if you look at the amount of grants you get, I know there's TxDOT grants, there's TCEQ grants and rural waterway grants, water system grants, and then there's a whole host of federal grants that are available on that. And I think that the city traditionally has looked at that and, tried to figure out which ones are profitable for us to take or not. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
You bet.
I didn't know what was being done. I think probably as far as the looking forward, I think the city ought to be, it ought to be a departmental level thing that says we're going to constantly look for grants. Because leaving money on the table right now, the government is printing money and sending it out as fast as they can run a printing press. And I would think that this might be an ideal time to have an application in for a grant and not have them look too hard at your average home price, et cetera, in your city.
You bet. Well, Ashley, let me ask you, could you, you probably are fairly close to, you're having to do a lot of the legwork on that, if you would. Can you kind of bring us up to date on that, that you know of, that we have pending?
Sure. As far as pending right now, we are looking into doing every FEMA, as soon as more information is available on the FEMA applications. Due to the storm, we will be applying for those. We took advantage of all the CARES Act funding that was available to us, and were awarded our entire amount. And then as well, on top of just grants, we are looking at all of those, but we're also working with our financial advisors on a long-term, just a financial plan, with all the different possible funding sources, and we're doing a lot of analysis on all of those. So between those and any grants that we, are able to apply for and are eligible for in the coming months, we will be looking at.
Wally, I think the answer your question is city staff are the ones that are the spear point on this, that get notified of the grant possibilities first. And they've been kind of looking at that from the standpoint of, I know Amber has looked at a bunch of them, and so has Ashley, that they work together to get that application pending on that.
That's all I was hoping was going on. Again, I don't hear anything about it, and I don't live in the area, so I don't get any newsletter or something to a resident. So I was just hoping that, in fact, that was what was going on. Ashley, congratulations for doing it. People that don't know you're doing it should be appreciating what you're doing. And also,
and that's a good point, Wally, that I live here, and I knew about the grant applications, but just because I was involved with the city so much, but I haven't seen anything from our media that would let our citizens know that we've done some of that. I don't know if we've sent that out in the water bill or not. Actually, that's something that y'all might consider doing, just to let our residents know that what we're catching up on that.
the staff got a really good coverage in the paper on what they did during the freeze. I thought it was wonderful. I was glad to see they got the kudos and the recognition, but grants are something that kind of slipped through the loophole, and nobody knows, and suddenly you've got a grant and you're spending money and you're not raising taxes to do something. And that's valuable information to people who live here.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Actually, y'all might consider just how we communicate with our residents as to how to let them know what grants we've had and what grants we're getting on that.
We will do that.
That always helps. So item number 9 is an update from the utility subcommittee. And I have waited for, I guess, 3 months for our engineers to certify the numbers that they and I agree on. So what I've decided to do on this is not wait for them any longer, but I'm going to take the numbers that we have and include them in our write-up from the utility subcommittee, and recommend that that the city still get the certification from our engineers on that. We have an agreement with the engineers. Roughly, we have about a 50% capacity for both our water and wastewater for additional expansion in in Rollingwood. One point I'd like to make on the utility side of that is I would like to make a comment in my presentation and plan to make a comment in my presentation that I believe that from a priority standpoint, those commercial properties that are located on the north side of BK's Road between Rollingwood Drive and Dry Creek that are currently not hooked to our system, but have been long-term commercial customers and taxpayers of the city of Rollingwood be given preference on future commitments for wastewater as they come through on that. Wally, that would be you also.
I got it. Yes.
But I think that it's only fair that before we expand to other uses that we make sure that that area is covered. One of the reasons, and people have asked me before, why we didn't expand the wastewater into that section when we were laying the lines there, and it was a decision made because we had at that time, which has been 20 some odd years ago, Wally.
Yeah.
Okay, 20 some odd years ago, we anticipated that TxDOT was going to start the road construction on BK's Road along that area, but they were not able to give us enough information to determine where we could safely put the wastewater line without it having to be moved. So we decided to hold off until they got to that point. Unfortunately, we still don't have that roadway, and we still don't really have a footprint as to where they go for the final footprint on that. But I do understand they are trying to finalize that footprint now, so maybe we'll have that within the next year or so. So anyway, that's where we were on that. Are there any public comments on the utility subcommittee? And I don't see any. Ashley, do you see anybody? I don't see anybody.
No, sir.
Right. Item number 12 is a discussion on public comment, possible action on, well, the update from the survey. We had that's a little out of order from the survey subcommittee. I have gotten a few comments that I'm trying to incorporate in this. My plan right now is to have the few little comments, and they're not major, but just some wordsmithing suggestions, and look at those and have the survey out by April the 5th. We have Bowie has agreed to help do some of the survey work. They're under contract with the city of Rollingwood. One of the things we'll make sure we do is to hand deliver a copy of the survey to each mailbox or each door. We can't do it face to face yet. As well as send it out by the normal ways we had talked about, which were through the utility bill and through digital, through our social media that we have in our city to do that. Rather than I am going to try to get some of our local organizations to provide some volunteers this week to be able to do this, to do the walk of the city next week to distribute the survey. If we don't get enough volunteers, then I'm going to use the Bowie paid people, but I would hope that we'll have enough volunteers to come in to do that. So that should be ready and be out by next Monday, so we can get that wrapped up. I thought the survey subcommittee did an excellent job of getting the survey together, and I liked it. There were a few little comments that I'm trying to meet with them to find out why they wanted to change some words on it, but they were not able to get back with me Friday and today. So hopefully we can, this week I can finalize that and have that ready to go out. So are there any comments or public comments or discussion on the survey? Ryan, I think that any changes be made. Of course, I'll make sure that we get, I get everybody's comments back on our subcommittee before we finalize that.
Sure.
Okay, great. Okay. Item number 13 is an update from our vision document drafting subcommittee. I have been working with Bowie and Pegasus both, and I think we have an agreement between those two groups to where we will probably use Bowie to help draft the vision document. Again, I'm going to finalize that this week, so I think that we will be in a position by next week to at least get started. Obviously, I don't think we can do much until we get some of the results of the survey back, and try to include that to make sure that we have included our residents' comments in that vision document on that. But I would prefer, in talking to both these groups, I think we would be better off. My opinion is that we'd be better off using Bowie to do the vision document drafting than we would Pegasus on that. And I'll open that up for discussion or public comment on that decision if anybody wants to add anything to that. Otherwise, that's the way I would prefer to go with this on that. Any comments from our task force or any comments from the public on that? Okay, not seeing any, so we will proceed. And David, I'm gonna let you take over from here. This is the update on the Bee Cave Road subdivision subcommittee. And I'm going to say subdivision from here on, and just, kind of just put that in there and make it subcommittee each time I say that, so it won't be so bad on that. I am going to have to leave a little early, so I'm going to turn this over to David to run from here on out. I've only had 2 comments that I wanted to make on the Bee Cave Road. I've actually done an analysis of my own, which I'll send out to everybody. But there are two general comments I'd like to see that we consider. One is, and we've been asked, and I agree, and have tried to do this, that we have anywhere possible, we try to incorporate interconnecting driveways to have so that these driveway, the parking lots are connected to where you could have multiple points to exit onto Bee Caves Road. And you could go from one to the other, one business to the other without possibly going on to Bee Caves Road. And there's some areas that might work in, some it doesn't. We did that on Mara Vista on the south side of Bee Caves Road with the bank area that goes all the way over to Montebello and ties in to the office building and to the commercial and retail centers there at Mara Vista. So that's something. The other is we currently have our ordinance currently provides for a commercial PUD. And I think, and I wanted to ask Amber, and I didn't get a chance to because she won't be in until tomorrow. But as I recall, there are some limitations on when you can do a commercial PUD based on the size of the property. And for some reason, I think it's either 3 or 5 acres minimum to have a PUD. My personal feeling is I like PUDs because when somebody does a PUD application, we as citizens know exactly what we're going to get. It's not like zoning where it's zoned and as long as it meets that criteria, you're going to get that. With a PUD, you know what it looks like, you know what its use is, you know you have a lot more information as you go forward. So, and it's some advantages to developers to have a PUD because they know exactly what they're going to get at the same time too. So I would ask that we consider or look at the fact that maybe we diminish the size or do away with the size requirements of PUDs so that we can allow that application on smaller tracks. So those are the two things I have. And I'm going to have to head out here in just a second. So David, I'm going to let you take this over on the BK Road subcommittee, and you are on item number 16.
Hang on. Okay. Sorry, my computer froze. I'm trying to pull the agenda back up here. Hang on one second. Oh, sorry, my computer doesn't want to behave, so I'll try to pull this up in a different way.
And
In any event, trying to unthaw from the big freeze still, and we've not made as a group a whole lot of process. Like you, Tom, I have some notes and have looked at some different things, but I think, part of it is kind of reconvening and really kind of going through and taking a look, if not property by property, kind of taking, area by area, and kind of talk about vision of what we see, want to see, what we don't want to see. Also going to be interested also on, I know we're going to have, I think we should go ahead and start doing some work individually and as a group, but also, making sure we keep an open mind such that we are able to also blend in, some of the feedback we get from this next survey as well. Because I know the survey, we have the results of the initial survey, but I think that the next survey also will have some more targeted questions on the Bee Caves road issue as well. And, also the other thing I wanted to discuss is, I don't know about some of y'all, but I'm starting to get in my life, slightly zoomed out. So if at some point as a subcommittee, we want to talk about maybe, getting together in person, maybe outside socially distant for a little workshop or two to compare notes. I typically work a little bit better in that type of atmosphere, and also have some big maps that people can take a look at, and want to throw that out there and get some feedback on, how comfortable some people may be in terms of getting together and having, a little working session or two, just to kind of get things going in between either official official task force meetings or official subcommittee meetings. So that is, from my perspective, where we are as a group, which is to be continued, but going to be picking up steam soon, particularly with this next survey round. One of the things I wanted to say is go ahead and do, kind of keeping with the agenda, is are there any public comments or actually any public comments for or regarding the Bee Caves Road subcommittee group? Okay, hearing no public comments, does anyone on the task force have any thoughts or comments they would like to add regarding agenda item 13.
Yes. Yes.
Wally,
David, I would love to have a meeting where we can look at maps and look at people across the table. I'd be happy to attend. I just finished my second Pfizer shot, and so I'm comfortable that I'm not going to give it to anybody and I'm not going to get it from anybody. So yeah, I would love to have a face-to-face. I'm not a big lover of Zoom meetings. They're too impersonal for me.
David, let me make a suggestion on that. I too have had my second shot, Wally, but just Saturday, so it's not really in effect yet. But regardless, we could do this with social distancing at the park, and we could reserve the little gazebo there,
Pavilion.
pavilion. And you could do it at any time you wanted to while it's still light. And we could reserve that, I presume, Ashley, to do that. I wouldn't do it in the mornings because there's a exercise class there and they may make us all do that. And I don't know that we could make it. They seem to be a lot more energetic in the morning than I would be. So I would, but yes, I think that'd be a good opportunity to do that, David. What we may do.
And having said that, I want to make sure of a couple things. One, that everyone's comfortable doing that, and no one feels like that they're going to be put in an uncomfortable position, because if someone says, hey, it's great that y'all are getting together, but I want to wait to be able to participate virtually, I can figure something out with I'm sure working with Ashley, with regard to have a partial Zoom or, a call-in number or something, even if, we do it kind of remotely there from the pavilion. The other thing is kind of to this group and to the city, anything that, we discuss, and anything that comes out of those kind of small working groups, we're going to be transparent about it and open to the public too. So, I want to say both those things as well, because those things are important to me in terms of openness of process and also accessibility. I'm just trying to think of some ways, because Wally, I appreciate your thoughts, because I'm the same way. And kind of in my practice and everything, I've been having a ton of Zoom calls, and I'm just kind of burned out on them. But also, I think in terms of kind of moving the ball forward a little bit more quickly here over the next few weeks, I think just a couple of quick get-togethers to compare notes and sit around a map working sessions with whoever might be interested, I think would kind of help move the ball along. And no final decisions or anything else will be made, but it kind of, helps us kind of, get at least some thoughts down on paper and rolling forward.
I think that's great. If y'all want to pick a time, we can, David, if you have a schedule that you want to try to do that, we could try to schedule that.
Let me coordinate through Ashley and throw her some dates and talk to her about the best times to use the pavilion area. I don't want to make sure we're not displacing any exercise classes, or most importantly, any kids' birthday parties. Also, it's maybe a little bit of distraction for some of us too, if too many things are going on there. But I'll coordinate with Ashley on kind of best times, and then throw out some times to the group.
Right. We actually don't have to be in the pavilion providing on the weather, because we can move some of the picnic tables to an area that is a little quieter than, say, the playscape, which I'm delighted to see our playscape being used so much, but still, we can find a place. We have the areas that we can do that at. So, if you wanted to, David, we could kind of start as an overview of each of the properties, and just kind of identify. I kind of did this a little differently. I kind of put an A and a B list, A, B, and C list, actually. And the A list is properties that I thought were viable for a change of use. The B was ones that I did not think were going to be change of use in the next couple of decades. And the C were ones where it could change, but the building might not. The use might change, but the building would probably stay the same. So if you wanted to, we could kind of, during this work session, we could kind of, oh, we're not on the work session yet. I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead. My mistake. Sorry, David.
No, you're fine. You're fine, Tom. Let me go back up. So any other, so going back to agenda item, I guess we've kind of moved off of 13 or now kind of in the, I'm sorry, we're off of 15 and into 16. Unless there's any public comments or any comments from anyone on the task force, we can kind of then, well, first of all, any more comments from task force, any more comments from public on agenda item number 16 before we glide into the working session? Okay, hearing no additional comments, let's take up agenda item number 17. And Tom, we can go ahead and slide into this. One of the things that Tom and I have talked about, and one of the things I'm going to be circulating to the task force meeting in the next week or so, to the task force members to the subcommittee members in the next week or so. And I'll also make sure that Ashley sends it more broadly to the group as a whole. Is one of the things that Tom and I have been working on is kind of a rough list of, on a property by property basis, some different criteria regarding those to kind of use an evaluation. And that's, kind of frankly where, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of, what kind of sets up for Tom's batching of properties that, A, right for a change of use, B, probably aren't right for a change of use anytime in the next, 10, 20 years or so. And then C, things that would be right for a change of use, but not necessarily for a change of building or building limits. So, Tom, with that, I will yield the floor back to you to kind of pick up.
I had two comments at two things to question. We have, well, we could start with the tough ones, which I think is probably the most controversial that we have. And let me make sure everybody understands the criteria that we're using. On the north side of Bee Caves Road, it's been.
Hey, Tom, let me interrupt you for 1 second.
Sure.
For those that are on this Zoom call, if y'all haven't gotten all the way through the package yet, there is a really good, helpful map at the very end of the packet that shows it's a zoning district map that's really, really good as a resource, but also kind of to follow along for this discussion. Tom, sorry about that.
No problem. So on the north side of Bee Caves Road, we're going to be looking at a maximum of 2 stories. Although there are a couple of sites that I looked at that I believe should be 1 story for a couple reasons. So that's one thing that we need to keep in mind. The other is we've got, other than usage, there's some other things to look at, and that is the parking requirements the setbacks that we have for commercial properties. And we do have an impervious cover requirement on our commercial properties in Rollingwood. We don't have that on residential, but we do have it on our commercial. So that's something that we can look at from the standpoint of, gee, do we need that? Should we expand it? Should we reduce it? Right now it's at 50%. There are some provisions that allow you to exceed 50%. For example, if you put the paved stones in your parking lot where it has some drainage that goes through it, supposedly that allows you to get some extra percentage of building area on that. So these are requirements that we currently have that I think we need to look at also as to how we go about doing that. The other part about that is we've got 4 zoning categories that we're using on this. You take out the single use zoning categories, which is the church and the hospital district, and you basically have 2 that we're dealing with, which is commercial zonings on that. So if David, if we just start this off and we said, okay, let's talk about probably the most controversial we have, which is maybe one of the most, I viewed this about 4 controversial properties. So if I look at this and start off with one of them is a church tract that we have, the Park Hill Baptist Church tract. And I've kind of looked at this a couple of ways. The issue, and some of our commercial realtor and development friends could probably shed a light on this, but my issue about this tract being too much of a, I know there was talk of this being a hotel tract. There was talk of it being a retail tract. I would like for us to consider the advantage of keeping it as a church tract. Park Hills Baptist Church has been an integral part of our city for as long as I've been here. And it doesn't mean that they're going to either sell. It's up to them, of course, whether they wanted to leave or stay or whatever. But I think that that's something to look at on that. The access of that tract has always been kind of a concern from a standpoint of how you would make that work as a commercial tract anyway. But I don't want to dismiss the deal and say, okay, it's a great corner for a commercial tract, or it's a great location with some caveats about parking and access. But I don't want to dismiss the fact that Park Hills Baptist Church has been an integral part of our community forever, a long time. And, it's not that bad to have a church in a community on that, whether you happen to go to that church or not. I don't, but that's another matter. They have been part of our community. So those are just my initial comments on that track. And we could put a provision in there that if they choose to, if they left for any reason, then we could look at it being a different use other than the church. I hate to use a higher use than a church. Somehow I just don't feel like I ought to say that. But regardless on that. So that was my comment on that. And if y'all don't mind, I'm just going to kind of go to the west here, and then we'll open it up to come back on that. I'm using the Rollingwood Town Center and the church site kind of together because they are connected in that they do have shared parking in the parking garage.
Yeah, and I think it's an important point, Tom, is half of the new parking garage is built on the church property.
Yes, and they do share the parking, and that's great. I just don't anticipate that we're going to find and I'm just going to talk about Rollingwood Town Center now. The Rollingwood Town Center has that we're going to look at changing Rollingwood Town Center, given that that is a fairly new building and it's established. Now, could we offer allowing retail in the first floor for a restaurant or something? That's a possibility. Now, there is one building of Rollingwood Town Center that is now occupied by the bank, and that is actually a separate owner than the office buildings. And I've always looked at that and encouraged them to consider that to be a prime restaurant site. And being a fan of Jack Allen's and Hop Dotty's, I kept thinking, boy, what a great Hop Dotty's site that would be. But that's just a personal preference. But just from a restaurant standpoint, as opposed to a bank, and keep in mind, we do not get any sales tax out of our banks. So we do get property tax, but we don't get sales tax. So, and we've got 5 banks in Rollingwood. So anyway, those are my 2 comments on those tracks. I try to group those together because they are connected in parking, shared parking on that. So
Tom, this is Brooke. Just one question there. Do you know what kind of, did the church and the town center have a contract on the parking share, or what kind of term applies there?
I'd have to look at that again, Brooke. I don't recall, but they did jointly, the Rollingwood Town Center and the church do have a contractual agreement about the shared parking. Part of the parking garage is actually located on the church site. And the theory on that is during the week,
They're offsetting uses.
they're offsetting uses, with the exception that the church does have a school, and they do have people coming in at all times on that. And there are some conflict. I will say there are some conflicting times, like during ACL on Sunday, they would have a different use because they do rent the parking garage out during ACL.
Although they haven't had that one open for an ACL yet. They've had the others open and they've rented those. So presumably,
yeah,
they would rent this. There's a good, Brooke, there's also a good discussion of the uses, plus also limits in the Endeavor PUD as well, because it's the Endeavor PUD that really allowed for an envisioned the arrangement where this parking structure would be built half on Endeavor property, half on church property, and be utilized between the two. And there are in the PUD some limits on basically access to and exit from that parking garage, and also uses of the two at certain times. However, Tom's right. I'm sure there is a even more detailed agreement between the church and Endeavor that gets much more into the finer points of the operation of that.
And that's a fairly new. Obviously, that was completed, I think, last year. So it's new on that. Well, and I tried to lump these together just because they do share some issues on that. I did want to point out one other thing on here. On the Rollingwood Town Center PUD, the Endeavor PUD, and off of Delana Lane, this would be located on the very northern portion of that track. The city of Rollingwood, as part of this PUD agreement, the city of Rollingwood picked up around 2.5 acres of land that's at the end of Delana Lane, or the drivable portion of Delana Lane that we own, that the city has. It has some conditions with our PUD agreement with, so our usage, there's only certain things we can use it for. But that is land that the city of Rollingwood has the ability to use for either a park or an open space or whatever usage we wanted to look at on that. It
And
shows
Tom,
on our map, it shows it to be part of the PUD, but it's in the, and I'd have to,
and you're specifically referring to, I think it's 2608 Delana
uh,
parcel.
yes, and that's only part of it. 2608 is, I don't think that's we don't have that whole track
Right.
on that. It's right where we have our main lift station for our wastewater that goes over into the city of Austin on that. But that is a piece of land that the city of Austin, city of Rollingwood controls, with caveats from our agreement with Endeavor Group and that PUD as to what we can do with it. Currently, it's undeveloped, and it's more of a green space between the timberline houses and the office buildings. So, but that's something that certainly we could look at from a park use or and David, y'all may have already looked at this under the park committee. Do you know if they have? I haven't seen anything come up on that, but that's a piece of land that the city of Rollingwood owns or controls with some deals. So, so from a standpoint of, let's just call this track number one, which is the church track and the Delana office building track. Does anybody have any thoughts as to what they would, a change of use on that?
Yeah, I have some thoughts on the current church tract. It's and first of all, I want to say, the whole proposal for that is a hotel site is, at least, and I haven't gone back and looked at it, but at least, I think dates back 30 years, and at least, as most recently as 20 years. I know at one time Endeavor, thought about maybe using that as a hotel site, but I wanted to be clear about one thing and transparent about one thing. I've not heard, anyone on this task force or anyone else say, hey, we really think that the best use there is a hotel. Knowing a lot of development pressures going on in the greater Austin area, I know that just from having friends and clients in the real estate business, that the church has had not one but multiple, has been approached by multiple parties to do something different with that church site. I know that they've been approached with an offer to basically redevelop, to buy them out, redevelop, and work with them to move them someplace else. I know that the church folks have been approached with an offer to buy them out, but keep them there under a redevelopment scenario that would include it. Almost all the recent development scenarios that I've personally heard of in the marketplace have involved some sort of office type campus, particularly kind of potentially tech oriented, given the location, given a number of factors. And so part of it is, in terms of looking at that, I think we have to be realistic that, the church is going to receive offers and everything else. I think we have to weigh a balance between as a group doing something that could be seen or interpreted as, hey, we want them to move on because we want to use it for something else. Because I agree with you, Tom, they've been great neighbors. They've been, great part of the community for years and years. However, I think we also at the same time as a group looking at a comprehensive plan have to be cognizant of the reality that they're going to be under development pressure. And, they may, at some point say, hey, look, you gotta, don't keep us from being able to, as a congregation or a group, monetize an asset here. Particularly if they stay there or take the money and go someplace, take the money and stay there, or take the money and go someplace else. But I do think, one of the things we need to be thinking of under a comprehensive planning process is okay, if the church decides on their own volition that it makes more sense to them to sell, relocate, sell, stay there, what is a use that site would lend itself to, that, as a community, we would support, that we'd want to see there, that we'd allow? Because the most likely scenario is going to be whoever comes in and buys that tract is going to come to us, I would imagine, given the scenarios that I've talked about and the complexity that I've heard about, is going to more than likely come back and probably want to talk to us about some sort of PUD arrangement so they could kind of customize it, which frankly, I think that for the reasons that Tom mentioned, particularly with that site and some of the sensitivities about it, would be advantageous to us. But, I think in the meantime, as part of the comprehensive plan, I think we could draft it in such a way. And I almost think it, drafting it in such a way that we respect the current use, we respect the current congregation that's there, but, look into our crystal ball and say, okay, if this is redeveloped, here is a use that as a community we think would be a good use for that, and B, something that we could live with there.
It's excellent, Dave. I agree with that. What does anybody else have any comments about, if you had to pick a use for that property that you think that as a Rollingwood resident or property owner of somebody that drives BK's Road, it's a consumer potentially, does anybody have any other uses that they would like to see ideally on that tract if it were vacant today?
Tom, this is Ryan.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? All right. I just a couple of thoughts on that tract. One is that just to make clear to anyone listening, and no, there's hardly anyone listening, but we don't have the ability to change anything on any of these tracts other than open up opportunities for people to do what they want with it. We don't have the ability to require a hotel to be there, or the church to sell their property or anything like that. That's not within our capabilities or jurisdiction as a strike force or even as a city. It's just simply giving the property owners more flexibility in choosing what they want to do with their own properties. That's what we have the ability to do. But specifically with respect to that property, I think the one thing that I want us to all keep in mind is that it does border a couple of homes. And although those are big lots, I think those might be some of the largest lots in all of Rollingwood. They're very deep lots, but they do border the back of that property. And in taking the time to meet with those neighbors and go into their backyards and take a look at what they see, I think, and I don't want to speak for anyone, but I think it's my job a little bit to communicate what I understand their concerns are. And I think the biggest concern is that they wouldn't want a 24-hour facility backing up to their property, with a lot of activity and a lot of lights on all night. And obviously there are things that beyond our our job here that the city could do later, requiring lights be not as bright and lumen, reduction in lumens and all of those things. But I do think it's important that we listen to our neighbors and be cognizant of the fact that the back of their properties would be negatively affected by something that had lights on or or activity 24 hours a day. So, and I don't know whether that can, I think we should try to be creative to the extent that there was a particular use that we thought would be valuable there, that would be a benefit to the city, whether we, I think that we should try to be creative in ways to try to get as much accomplished as we want, so that maybe there's ways to have activity on the front end of the lot, but not the back end. I mean, I just think we need to be open to a lot of possibilities, but at the same time respectful of the neighbors that would be immediately affected by it. And last, just in case it wasn't clear, because I did circulate it around a while ago, I think that the city's ability to use funds from a hotel are extremely restricted.
Yeah.
And it's not just simply free tax money. It is free tax money that is very, very limited in scope. And so you can use it to promote tourism within your city, which I'm not sure what tourism we would promote within our city. Or you can use it to promote the arts within your city. So theoretically, if we really wanted to have, I don't know, an art museum in Rollingwood, we could pay for it that way, or a, I don't know, a kids music in the park program or something like that. You could, but it might get to the point where we wouldn't even know what to spend the money on if we had a hotel there for 15 years. Whereas if it was a different use, the money would not be restricted, and we could spend it on whatever we wanted to.
Yeah, I think we've looked at, David was correct. This has been talked about as a hotel site for decades. I've never been a fan of that, but I would point out this, Brian, we have a ordinance in Rollingwood, which I'm not sure not many people know about, but all our businesses are required to cease operation at 10 p.m. We don't have an ordinance that allows for 24-hour. It would take it, obviously that could change, but currently we don't have that kind of ability to do that. And I've always looked at it, yes, that hotel tax is potentially a lot of money. It is highly restricted. I agree totally with your analysis on that. And then you do have an extra cost of operation for the city for hotels from a couple of things. One is potentially there are utility issues, but also our policing issues. We do have some, unfortunately, hotels, you never know who you're going to have, and they end up sometimes with other issues that come in that policing has to deal with that. Especially doing that so close to all the venues that we have going on. I can imagine that would be something else that would happen on that. So without looking at hotel, I did not consider a hotel on there as an alternate use. And I appreciate both David and Ryan's analysis. I certainly do not want to see Park Hills Baptist Church leave. But if for some reason they did, at their own volition, without any prodding from the city, then it could potentially be a two-story max retail center with some additional setbacks. And I do agree that we need to be cognizant of not only these neighbors, but all our neighbors that abut our commercial tracts, and that we have additional setbacks where especially where the creek is, and that's really where I'm talking about, is on the creek, because that is all creek there. And David, this is actually your deal from a water quality standpoint, because eventually the city is going to end up with having to deal with this water quality issues that we have to, and if we start looking at that now, I think it's a lot easier for us to look at as pre-development on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Tom, that's one thing about that. One thing about that site is, there are 3 lots back there. The creek runs back through those 3 lots. And then also that lot is abutted by the Delano Lane right of way, which is City of Austin. But on the backside of the church lot, there's also quite a bit of property down there in the floodplain. That's I'd say, given what's going on right now with Eanes Creek, Dry Creek, depending on what you want to call it, as well as the Endeavor project, et cetera. That's likely to remain floodplain and be undevelopable, because I really don't see anyone being able to get based on what's going on down there, a clumb or anything to develop down there. And so I think, logically, most of that development is going to be in the future development. It's going to be right in higher elevations. But, that's not to say that, we can't take a look at it and, say for any number of different reasons, from water quality to otherwise, that, we'd like to see, some sort of buffer back there on the or set back on the back side of that lot, if it is at some point developed.
Again, I'm more important than setbacks are good. You can be cognizant of your neighbors, I think, in other ways other than setbacks, but that's the important thing, that we protect the integrity, but we also there are property rights of our property owners that we have to look at. And every time we do a major setback, that's, diminishes what they can do with it. I apologize, but I've got to go to I have a conflict that I have to run to another meeting. David, if you could take this from here, and if you would just kind of go as far down the property list as you can, with keeping in mind that this north side, we've committed to stay 2 stories maximum on that. And then
and one
I'll
thing
be glad to meet. If we meet in person, I think that's a great idea. And I actually have a stand that I can put the big map on, and we can throw darts at it or whatever we want to do.
I like that.
So, and I apologize, but I do have another meeting that I do have to go to that I'm running. And I think, David, you can take this from here if you don't mind.
Sounds good to me. Thanks, Tom.
All right. Thank y'all. Bye.
Hey, David, I have one more comment on that track.
Yeah, go ahead.
Brian. I just want to, a couple of people have asked me, why are we bothering to, if the church is there and they're not intent to leave, and why are we bothering? And that's probably true everywhere across the board, that there is a property owner who has more interest in all of these things than we do. But what I like about the idea of thinking of the vision is just envisioning what we want in our community, so that a developer doesn't have to guess, to the extent that the church is interested in something there. I think it's a lot better if we didn't make them guess as to what we might have in mind there, as we give them some idea of what it is that we might be interested in. I think it makes the job a lot easier for everybody if they don't have to go spend a whole bunch of money to come up with a plan that is inconsistent with what we might want, or give them a heads up that essentially, hey, we're open to it. I just think it helps everybody out if we do have a vision for what we'd like on these properties, or what we would accept on the properties. I think it helps everybody, the property owner, the future property owner, us, everyone, if we kind of give them an idea of what we would like.
Yeah. And Ryan, I appreciate you saying that, and I agree with that. And I will add on to that and basically say, part of this also as a vision document is I think it sends a pretty strong message if we go ahead and say, look, we're comfortable with, kind of a, office campus type setup or a, even like, 2-story retail type setup. But, say, hey, we're not interested in anything more than, this height, or we're not interested in a hotel use because, I agree with you, Ryan, having looked at basically the state law on what you can use hotel tax receipts on, we're pretty limited. And in any event, to the extent that there's a possible, kind of small boutique type hotel site that's potentially viable somewhere in our city limits. There's one other I can think of as a possibility, and it's not this, for any number of different reasons. And I hear the neighbors' concerns, but also I have some concerns, about a new hotel right on that side. I can understand how, depending on what it would be, a hotel developer would love to be there. But I'm with you, Ryan, from a tax standpoint. I'm not sure it makes sense to us. I'm not convinced that it would make sense to us, particularly as a new development. And I think there's one, maybe two other uses there that could make sense, particularly some of the things I've heard about, where it would be a redevelopment, and frankly, a redevelopment keeping the church scenario, keeping the church there. I think that there's some options there, and I think it's one we need to take a look at. But I agree with you in terms of being a vision about, signaling to developer, okay, here's kind of what we would, be willing to see there if you were to deal with the church, and would work with you on, and conversely, by doing the same thing, signal to them, here's what's gonna, not really gonna be a non-starter with us.
Another example of the vision thing there, and you and I have talked about this, is that the Delana Lane Road itself could be a great trail.
Yeah.
And there's already apparently some money in the town center for improvements with respect to the trail. But I mean, that's the kind of thing we could tell people. Yeah, we'd love to have something here that we're willing to give and have some development, whether it be retail or office. Obviously, everything for us is preferably retail, because then we get 2 taxes rather than just one. But when
I'd say caveat to that, Ryan, is depending on what kind of retail you use.
That's true. Some of them, like banks, don't do us any good.
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone wants to see a big box there.
That's right. That's of course. And I don't think that would make any sense for a big box retailer anyway, because the property is probably too valuable and too small.
And the parking.
Yeah, and access. But I think the kind of thing that we could say to them is, we want to, we care about our green space and our trees, and it's going to be very important to us to develop this property with respect, giving respect to adjacent neighbors, to taking good care as stewards of the creek and the trail. But given all of that, with the right partner, we might be able to find a win-win for everybody. And that's the kind of vision thing that I think could be very helpful for our community moving forward.
Yeah, well said, Ryan. Kind of moving on from that, and is there does anyone else have any comments or thoughts, or want to discuss the church Truckee more? Brooke?
I just have a question. Does the city of Rollingwood, or does the city of Austin, or does TxDOT control where access cuts can be made from that track onto the Mopac access road?
My understanding is that is all, since it's TxDOT right of way, would be a discussion with TxDOT. And Brooke, you've raised a terrific point. Regardless of whatever goes there, it's like was done with the PUD. You're going to have to have whoever's looking at a redevelopment scenario do a really robust traffic study. and look at everything from what that's going to do to traffic loading there to the curb cuts, et cetera.
Okay. So even if so whatever we recommend, it's going to be subject to whatever access TxDOT might permit or allow to that tract. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we'd want to coordinate it where if there's a change in use, and I'm going to defer to the city council and the city attorney to a degree here. But my understanding, if there's a change in use and if there's development, we would need to we would be basically requiring them to do a traffic study, and also TxDOT would want to be a part of what happens with the both the traffic study, but then also any curb cuts, any additional curb cuts, and also ingress egress from the site.
Okay.
But that's a really good thought, Brooke. Anything else on the church side?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a few thoughts. If we want to, I agree with Tom. Tom was talking about the potential change in use, kind of as a for instance of the potential future use of the I think the site's 2702 Bee Cave. That's the that is the right now I think it's a little bank there. I'm with Tom to basically look at and be open to a property like that, a potential use as a restaurant in the future. I know, as part of that PUD, there was, I think at the time, no restaurant use envisioned there. But, I think that's one kind of taking a look at it. I think a restaurant space could potentially make sense there on a, number of different levels as a, for instance. And then a few thoughts regarding kind of what I would call the kind of the north side of Mopac, sorry, north side of Bee Caves. And I agree that with Tom that after a lot of looking at it, a lot of hearing from citizens, I think the 2-story limit makes all the sense in the world for a variety of different reasons that have to do with neighborhood values, protecting residential lots, etc. Also, as a practical matter, you're just not going to be able to park. A lot of those lots are so small, commercial lots are so small that from in order to comply with the necessary amount of parking for the uses there, particularly retail, they're not going to be able to have parking to support really more than that anyway. So I don't feel like we're putting an undue restriction on there. One thing I will say is, he said, some of those lots, could lend themselves to, or probably should be 1-story. One of the things to look at and consider is also when we start looking at the impervious cover, particularly on those lots that have been developed for a long time. A lot of the impervious cover on all of those lots is a lot of those commercial lots in some cases is 70-80% impervious cover, and we're done before the TCEQ Edwards aquifer water quality rules applied, et cetera. So really, even if you had a scenario where, say, you had a lot with 70%, 75% impervious cover, even if it was redeveloped and you allowed them and you said, hey, if you keep your height down, we'll do a little bit of a trade with you and let you keep 75% impervious cover, one of the advantages that we're going to have is even at a 75% impervious cover, they still have to comply with the Edwards aquifer protection rules, which means that we're going to see a considerable improvement in terms of water quality and water quantity coming off the site, just because of what they have to do with regard to building water quality structures, et cetera. And also, I think we should look at, in order to allow for more development flexibility on a lot of those, since we are going to, you know, I think we ought to be asking for all those, for them to keep, you know, under 2 stories, under 30 feet, I think is the current ordinance. We'd be looking at also, I think we should take a look at also doing away with, particularly in the areas where TxDOT's already widened the road, bee caves. I think we should take a hard look at doing away with the front setbacks, because one of the things, you know, particularly in traffic studies, et cetera, traffic tends to move slower through areas where you have structures closer to the road, moves faster when you have structures away from the road. And also the front setbacks that were there kind of traditionally were to allow for utilities, et cetera. And also future right of way. Now that bee caves has been expanded, I think we should take a look at, you know, maybe incentivizing under any redevelopment scenario, some of those businesses or some of the developers to move the development closer to bee caves road for a variety of reasons. And that's kind of, you know, just kind of some general thoughts that I have. There's some more that I'm working on a little bit, taking a look at specific properties that I'm going to want to discuss later, but that's kind of what I want to lay out now. Is there anyone who wanted to talk about anything else with regard to this?
David, this is Ryan. I'll chime in again. I just wanted to back you up on the idea of minimizing or eliminating setbacks in the front. And I think that we should trade for that. And the trade that we should get is either cementing or expanding the setbacks in the back that are adjacent to single family homes. So I think it's a win-win if we give the property owners more flexibility to use the front of their property, and then make sure that we're protected in the back in places where it doesn't harm them. I know there are places where too many setbacks could make something undevelopable, and we certainly don't want to do that. But I think giving them additional space in the front may help them, especially if we are, and I've talked about this with you too, maybe a little bit more flexible in parking. You know, we are as a society going to be moving away from everybody driving everywhere. And it's probably going to happen fast within the next 10 to 15 years, where everything's going to be on-demand transportation. If we're going to talk about vision, I think that we should at least think about the idea of not having an automobile parking dependent revisioning of the city.
Yeah, I think we ought to take that up and discuss that, you know, as part of as we look at transportation issues, as we look at mobility issues, you know, around this area. And I appreciate those comments, you know, and I think that's something that, you know, we could put in, you know, something about the need for you know, the need for the city as that becomes more and more of a reality, to basically have parking requirements that reflect that. Wally, were you gonna chime in?
Apparently there are people sitting here that are unaware. There's a 100-foot green belt at the back of every commercial property, from the Rollingwood Center property all the way up to where Rollingwood Drive comes into Bee Caves. That was imposed back when they were concerned about the safety or the pleasure of the people who backed up to the then Endeavor project. So that has never left. That particular setback, I have 4.63 acres, and if I take all the setbacks, including that one, I have left 1.7 acres to build on. The rest is all setbacks. So if that's 100 foot stays in place, that has to be discussed.
Yeah, Wally, that's a good thought in there. I appreciate your thought on that. And that's, I think, one thing we should look at is, you know, it's, you know, when you look at a property like your property, which I'm really familiar with, you know, it's, you know, I get that it's a greenbelt setback, but it basically would, on a redevelopment scenario, it would basically require a greenbelt setback for something that's not currently green. And so, you know, I mean, it's, we can, you know, discuss, you know.
Well, I'm only pointing it out because we had a discussion of trading front setbacks for getting more back setback. You're stuck with a 100-foot greenbelt right now, according to state law. And there are very few things you can do with that unless you do away with it.
You mean city law?
I'm sorry?
You mean city?
The city named a greenbelt, and that prohibits any use of that. And if my building burned down, everybody said, well, you just come in and we'll redo it, you put the same building back. And that unhappily is not according to state law. According to state law, if my building burned down, I've just contributed to the greenbelt.
And Wally, I did know of the setback. So just to clarify, you didn't have to tell me twice that I didn't know it, because I did. But I also think we, you know, again, talking about the vision thing, I think it would benefit property owners if we eliminated the setback on the front. I've also talked about, David, about trying to be smart and possibly eliminating setbacks on the side too. Does it make sense to have a whole bunch of tiny little small lots that each of which has to have their own driveway and has to be separated on the side by another lot? So what I'm proposing and in favor of is big thinking, trying to help property owners at the same time as envisioning how we can have a win-win both for the property owners and the community.
That's fine.
That's good. That's helpful. Thank you both for having these types of discussions, because these are the kind of discussions we need to be having and frankly taking a look at. You know, from my perspective also, you know, I'm also a big believer, particularly in the backs of some of these lots where we have Dry Creek running through. I'm a big believer. I mean, as a practical matter, depending on where the creek runs through, we're going to have setbacks anyways because of floodplain, et cetera, particularly, and not as much Wally's, but as you get to the east of where Wally's is, starting with about the finish line. But on a related subject, I'm also a big proponent of vegetative buffers, particularly using native trees and native plants, native adapted plants. So, you know, that's something we could also explore as well to add screening and some natural beauty where it makes sense. Is there anything else anyone wants to take up right now? We're at about the hour-and-a-half mark. So some of you may be getting a little Zoom weary. So I want to make sure that, you know, kind of if we've kind of hit everything everyone wants to hit right now during this meeting in this working session, or at least during this, let's take up this working session right now. If everyone feels like they've gotten it on the table and discussed everything they want to raise during this working session, I'm happy closing agenda item number 17 and picking it back up at a time when some of us are fresher as well.
David, this is Ryan again. I was hoping that you might at least introduce so that people can be thinking about it and so that the public can know that it might be discussed. Any revisioning of the hospital district, because I think that's, that's a, and we don't have to get into any detail, but I was wondering if you could just introduce it so that people know that it's out there.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, Ryan. I have been a proponent, and after a lot of discussions of taking a look at the hospital district and seeing if the hospital district is a use and a zoning designation that we need and that makes sense for us. I'm planning to, but I've not yet had a discussion with the owner of the, I think it's an Arise Now Medical Center. I think that, but namely, we're talking about, for those of you who don't know, the 3003 Bee Cave and a little sliver of 1015 Bee Caves Wood, which is designated as a hospital district. There's been, and I'm a proponent of this, opening it up and looking at potential other uses, future uses for that site other than limiting it to a hospital district, because I think there is a lot of things that that site could lend itself to, either under a potential reuse of the existing building and conversion into something else, or redevelopment scenario at some point in the future. So that's one of the things I'd like for us in particular to take a look at, because that is one of the bigger lots there, kind of on that side of Bee Caves Road. And I think it lends itself to a lot of different potential uses. Brian, did you have anything else you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I agree. I think that's a place that we ought to look at. And if people haven't been there, it's kind of hard to find. It took me a while. I had to turn around a couple times before I got there. But that and the lot next to it, which I think is, well, it's hard for me to read on this map. Let me see if I can.
That's
3001.
Yeah, 3001.
Yeah, 3001. They just, if you drive over there, it just seems like, wow, this didn't work. I think it was a really good idea, however long ago, that someone thought maybe we could make a hospital district here, but it just doesn't seem to be working all that well. And again, here's just asking the vision thing. What would we like to see over here? What could work? What would we like to tell developers we might be interested in seeing? I would encourage anybody to drive over there and look. I again want to be cognizant of the Tremont folks. They are single family residences within our city. They currently have an office building right behind them.
Right.
But what if, trying to ask the vision thing, what if there's some better use of that we can entice the property owner into making more money for the property owner, but also protect our residents a little better. And frankly, this is probably not that popular, but I would also think that it's the right thing for us to do to consider the city of Austin houses that are directly behind it as well, which they are, both of those lots. I just think it's the right thing to do. It's always the right thing to do the right thing. And if there's a way that we can benefit the property owner by giving them more abilities to do things that are in their best interest, and at the same time create a little distance between a 2 or 3 story building and the homes, I think that's a win-win for everybody. But I don't have any idea of what is best there.
Do we have examples of this, of these business ideas that businesses want to invest in and make happen that also benefit the houses next door to them in other parts of the city, or just to make sure? I mean, I don't have examples, and I'm trying to get educated just to make sure we're not looking for a unicorn here.
Yeah, and I'm sure we could, Mo, I'm sure we could find some. And I mean, I think there's a lot, but most of them, you typically, from the city of Austin anyways, in a scenario like this, typically involves, creating more density, more height in terms of trade-offs, that then appease the neighbors. The interesting thing about that 3001, and those of you who haven't been up to those sites, I'd encourage y'all to go up there, because until I really went up there and spent time and everything, it's really hidden. And in terms of redevelopment, what it gets redeveloped as, that's gonna be one of the challenges, is because it's not gonna be, one of the positives about where it is it's it's largely hidden. One of the negatives about where it is it's largely hidden. So I mean, I think we're gonna have to be a little bit, creative, and looking at 3001. And Ryan's right. There's an office building that's been there for a while that actually predates the Tremont houses. That's kind of right up on, if y'all look at the map, right on that road. And it's a little gated enclave. Right on the other side of the road is that, I think it's probably about a 4-story or so office building. I think that office use, is probably gonna be pretty viable economically. I haven't seen anything suggest that it wouldn't be. It seems like they, have tenants in it and everything else. I think it would have to be, in order to incentivize some sort of redevelopment, I think it would have to be some sort of change in use that would make sense to drive economically a redevelopment away from office. I don't think anyone's going to come in and build, knock it down to 4-story office building and build a new 4-story office building. But, I mean, there's some other scenarios that, potentially could be attractive, development scenarios that could be attractive, to folks taking a look at it. Whether it's, kind of another, garden home, or like kind of Tremont now, whether it's, potentially another, kind of 0 lot line garden home type development, whether it's, some sort of condo type development, given where we are with housing, maybe. I don't think it would lend itself, I don't think it lend itself to retail, because you don't have the visibility issue. And then when you look at, the hospital district as well, it's, as a hospital district, it's one of the things that hurts it is it's not real visible as you go up and down bee caves. I've heard kind of varying reports about, from physicians I know about, the desirability of that location for what its current use is. And, I think there's a possibility again to look at, some potential different uses up there as well, that we could talk about. Because I will tell you, the views, if you go up there, the views from both of those properties are pretty stinking amazing, because you're up on top of a bluff. And, in terms of, whether it be, if people are willing to talk about, some high-end condo type development or garden home type development, given housing pressures right now, I think that could be a real, possibility, for a reuse. And, I think I mentioned this to you, Ryan, if we were to ever consider some sort of, boutique type hotel, high-end condo mix with maybe some restaurant, a little bit of retail space. I think I think that could potentially lend itself towards it. And be a much better location, frankly, from our community's standpoint than the church tract.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And just from my perspective, to answer Mo's question, I don't know. That's not my business, so I wouldn't pretend to know what it is that the demand is for. Although I think that if we allowed anybody to build condos or apartments, I think they would flip pretty fast, because there is the demand for residential in Austin right now is frankly insane.
Yeah.
But that said, right now on 3001, you can only be an office. So
Right now, yeah.
and my view is just like, if there are other acceptable uses for us as a community, let's let people know that we would also accept something else there if our community is okay with it. And that just gives developers and business or property owners more flexibility in choosing what it is that they want to do with the property.
Yeah, and I agree with that, Ryan. But I think those are the types of potential reasons we should be talking about. And also one of the things about looking at it, obviously if you do a and just because we say condo, it doesn't have to mean it's a high-rise condo. You can have a condo where you have a condo development made up of basically independent freestanding structures. You can do condos as townhouses. One of the things about potentially taking a look at some sort of high-end condo use is you're able to basically typically have more control over density, number of units, and you have ownership, fee ownership, as opposed to apartments where you're having in terms of multifamily development where you're having rental by design. But those are thoughts. But I mean, I think those are the types of sites that have if you're going to look at potential redevelopment scenarios, because of the topo, because of the thing of the lack of visibility from the road, that's kind of what it lends itself to. Particularly when you look at what's going on, and I've driven over there a couple times. When you look at what's going on with that little Tremont Garden Home, I mean, there's and I think it's either 19 Tremont or 20 Tremont. There is someone that there's a new house going up. It's barely visible, but it looks like it's about 3 stories because of the grade, but it's almost going completely just vertical up to where it gets on that cul-de-sac. And I mean, I would call it from a home building standpoint, a exceedingly difficult house to build, but it's getting built, and there's a demand out there.
Brooke, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. Is 3001 accessible from any access point other than the road that goes adjacent to the Tremont area?
Brooke, it's David. Yes, it's accessible from the road that comes off of Bee Caves next to the Tremont area, as well as you can access it. And we don't have street names here, but the street that goes to the medical center, it has the parking between the medical center and that office building is open, so you can just drive right through there. That's shared access drive.
Okay.
That's a good question, though.
I have to go. I can't. What building is on there now?
It's an office building.
Okay.
On 3001.
Yes.
It's an office building.
Okay. All right. I'll go take a look.
Yeah, I mean, I'd really recommend it because, I mean, yeah, as long as I live here, I've never really gone up there and taken a hard look at it and really looked around. There's also, so the Rise Medical Center's up there, and then on the Rise or on the medical track, it's kind of a funky, it's a one-story parking garage
Yes.
on there as well. And then there is the about 4-story office, 3-4-story office right next to it. But particularly if you go up to the top of that 1-story parking structure, the views from up there are just unreal.
Okay. All right.
David, I had not thought of opening up 3001 to a similar small lot line development like Tremont, but that's actually a great idea, and people might really be happy with that, and the owner might really be happy with that.
Well, I being up there and everything else in terms of, okay, well, what's the demand, what's the need, and basically, what type of product can you put there, just in terms of, looking at taxable values, everything else.
Mhm.
But also, the ability to, I mean, the houses that are over in Tremont and are being built there and are already there. I mean, they're nice houses. They just happen to be kind of executive home, 0 lot line formats, but I mean, they're nice houses. And, if I think there's a potential if you allowed some sort of similar use over there. And this is something that, I just kind of thought off the top of my head, having been up there. One of my kids has a good buddy whose family lives over there, and owns one of them. And just the thought being kind of up there going, because of the way it's situated, because of the way the road's already, and because of the way it's already gated on, the one side, or actually 2 sides of it, this is something that, could work as, a little bit of an additional build out maybe. But I have not, Ryan, to be fair, I've not really ground truth that with anyone about whether or not it would be financially viable or make sense. Based on what I assume is a valuation of the existing offices, that is.
Right, that makes sense.
I have one other question, and this is, I don't know if you're ready to move on to something else, but when appropriate, I wanted to get some idea of that piece of property on Edge Grove that backs up to, that's currently undeveloped, and it's marked as commercial, that backs up to the gas station and that small strip center. The one at 28, behind 2800, 2802, 2808, 2814, and is across the street from residential. Have y'all given that any thought?
The one that the city owns right now, it's about 5 acres.
Owns that? Well, it's marked, it doesn't have an address on it, but it's marked commercial.
Yeah, my understanding, and we could ask Tom knows, or maybe Ashley, do you know? My understanding is the city owns that. Do you know, Ashley?
I'm sorry, owns what now?
So there is a piece of property that is marked as professional and business office district behind 2814, to the north of 2814, 2814, 2808, 2802, and 2800 bee caves. So back by where the Shell is and the Gaddy's was, and then there's 2 little strip centers.
Yeah, that area right there behind those, kind of next to the road right there.
Yeah.
I do think the city does own that, yes.
I'm pretty sure,
I-
but I'm also pretty sure that's all actually down in the floodplain.
Yeah, I think it's 100% floodplain.
Yes.
Well, I had thought the city owned the property that's behind 2724 Big Cave, across Edge Grove from there.
No, they don't own that.
They don't own that? I had thought Tom had said they owned it because they had to acquire it.
No, I actually own, I'm on Groveport. I own 3A.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and I just checked real quick the FEMA floodplain maps and the floodplain maps show all that in the floodplain. That 5 acres.
Okay,
While we're talking about odd lots, there's also the lot behind Tremont. I just noticed that just because I look at real estate in the neighborhood, that went for sale and recently went off the market. So I assume it was under contract, but the one that's behind the Tremont, it's kind of a strange, odd sliver that runs behind those houses. That went for sale and was sold recently.
abutting BK's Road?
Yes, the largest part of it is on Bee Caves Road, and then it runs back behind the houses on Tremont.
Hmm.
Could have been yours for $250,000, just so you know. I assume that means it's unbuildable, but somebody bought it. Another odd lot that we might want to think about at some point is over by South Peak. You see 10 South Peak borders Bee Caves, but it's a residential.
Yes,
There's also 3012 Bee Caves. I believe there's nothing there, if I'm thinking of the right lot, but one of the city council members mentioned to me that they believed that that lot was intended to be residential, just like 10 South Peak, and that it had been zoned incorrectly. Obviously, we wouldn't want to do anything without talking to the property owner there, but that is a lot that's accessible from inside the city, inside the neighborhood. And if that property owner wanted it to be residential, that might be something we could consider as well.
Yeah, and there's a little bit, if it's the one that I think you're talking about, there's a little bit of history there that we can let me run down and we can make sure it's the right one we can talk about more later.
And Ryan, that's accessible from South Peak?
Well, I haven't driven down there to look at it, but that
In theory, yes.
I believe so. Yeah.
I'll walk it tonight and confirm.
mhm.
Good idea.
Well, it's so that the end of South Peak runs right up to the front of it.
Okay, I mean, it's quite a hill right there.
Yeah.
I've walked close, but it didn't look accessible from any time I've walked by it, but I'll pay better attention.
Yeah, it all depends. I mean, it all depends on what you build there, how you build it, etc. I mean, it would be, yeah, because you'd be, coming up to it and going off pretty quick, but yeah. And let me double check with Tom, but I think at some point in time, plans or proposal was submitted, possibly for that tract, but I can't remember if it's that one or the one next door. But let me before we get too far down this rabbit trail, let me get a little more data on that. And Ryan, that's really interesting news about that sliver next to Tremont.
Yeah, that's just something we ought to be aware of. Had I had my act together, I would have thought that'd be a good thing for the city to purchase, but I assume that didn't happen.
Well, now you're gonna make me go check TCAD, and look at the tax records on that. Very good. Good discussion on those items. Is there anything else while we're in working session? Okay, if there's not, I propose we close agenda item number 17 and work our way to agenda item 18, which is other business. Does anyone have any other business to discuss with the strike force or that we need to deal with? Okay, if there isn't, we're coming up on 2 hours. If there isn't, would anyone like to propose that we adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
We
I
have,
second.
Second.
very good. We have first, we have a second. Ashley, I'm gonna say we're adjourned.
All right. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, David.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everyone for being here and
Thanks.
keep on thinking about these bee cave issues and, feel free to email me or Tom or Ashley or all of us.
All right.
Thank
Thanks.
you, David.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.